Today I review a movie I'm just burning to tell you about. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 1981 80s camp slasher film, The Burning. This is a movie that was recommended to me in the comments section of my review of We Go On by Rotted Soul Ryan Billings. Thank you, Ryan, for bringing this to my attention because I had honestly never heard of this one before, and now in what is potentially a very controversial statement, I will say that this is now my favorite 80s camp slasher movie, like ever. I think this unseated Sleepaway Camp for me, and I'm going to take just a moment here to kind of defend my statement a little bit here. You obviously cannot talk about 80s camp slasher films without talking about Friday the 13th, and going down the rabbit hole, and I'm probably going to get some nasty comments on this one, I have to say that as much as I love the Friday the 13th series as a whole and the Jason Voorhees character, just completely honestly, I do think that the first and second movie were a bit boring. They kind of slagged through the fact that everybody was in camp was just kind of treated as the setting, all the characters were one-dimensional and basically just kind of tossed into the meat grinder, and that's pretty much the point of the movie. And as far as shocking endings go, I don't think it held a candle to Sleepaway Camp as far as that element of things go. But ultimately, you were basically just looking at teenagers that were misbehaving in a summer camp and getting hacked up. It iconic, legendary, and kicked off one of the best, most long-lasting franchises in the realm of horror. And I recognize that for what it is, but just taking it as an objective film on its own, I don't think it really held a candle to Sleepaway Camp or The Burning. And one thing that Sleepaway Camp and The Burning has in common is camp is not just the setting. It's not just the reason for the people being there so that they can be hacked up in an isolated environment. It is a focal point of the movie. Camp is an element of it. It's almost a character unto itself. And that was something that the 80s presented to us, 70s and 80s, that were just great. Were great camp movies. When we had a camp slasher movie, it kind of tacked onto that. We had Meatballs. There were just some good old 70s and 80s wholesome camp movies going around. And Sleepaway Camp and The Burning managed to not forget that camp is a portion of this, and they both told a good story as a slasher and as a camp movie. And that was something that I think that The Burning did even better than Sleepaway Camp, and one of the things that elevated about this. In the world of horror, slashers are more gory and shocking than they are cerebral and terrifying, and this one's no different. But I will say that having the good camp movie embedded and imbued within it, it really elevated the whole storyline. It made the characters more rich, and then the slasher element, when it started really kicking off, it made it feel more visceral and more real, and there was an emotional investment. And when you saw these characters that up until this point had been fairly jolly and had established their personalities start to go through this, it really hit home all the harder. I'm going to go ahead and throw up all the categories here. I'm probably not going to address them individually, but individually each category is worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. This movie follows a bunch of different characters, but I think primarily are kind of, if we have a main protagonist in this one, it would be mild and meek Alfred as he struggles to kind of find friends and other campers. There's some that are bullying him, there's some that are trying to help him, and that was something that I really loved about this film, is that you had realistic characters in it. Even the bully himself, Glazer, played by Larry Joshua, did a pretty decent job of it. He was probably, if I had to point out a one-dimensional character, Glazer would probably be it. But the other characters actually had a richness and a depth within them. And I think the one that I really want to point out, standout marks here, is Dave, played by Jason Alexander. This movie marks a lot of firsts. First of all, I think this was the first movie that was produced by Miramax Films. It was also the first movie that was done by the Weinstein brothers. And this is Jason Alexander's debut film. And I was kind of expecting a performance that would be, I think, indicative of a freshman foray into the world of filmmaking. But he actually really stood out amongst the rest and really showed some fine acting chops in what would ordinarily have been just a throwaway movie. He, as the Dave character, brought a sense of camaraderie and jovialness that, he took Alfred under his wing, but at the same time, he wouldn't, hesitate in being frustrated by Alfred's hesitance to jump in the water, things like that. But he would still defend him against Glazer. And there was just a lot of really good depth dynamics there, and it really showed. He has not necessarily a leadership skill. In fact, I would say that he's not a leader, but he's still kind of the charismatic person that will band together everybody. If spirits are down, then he's the one to bring them back up. And there was just a lot of real good depth to him, as well as the main counselor of Todd, who plays a significant part in this film too. Just all around, this is what I mean by when I say that this is a good camp movie, is these characters actually, you care about them. For me, that's what sells the movie. There is a lull between kills in this movie, a significant portion of time where things are maybe perhaps occasionally menacing, but the real action hasn't kicked off yet. And it's a good chunk of time. And in that chunk of time, for a little while, I forgot I was watching a horror movie. My brain had just kind of clicked over to 80s camp movie, and I was still enjoying the heck out of it. So when the slasher elements and everything really did kick off, like I said earlier, it hit home all the more, and that is one of the reasons that I love this movie so much. The whole story arc of the Cropsey Killer and the genesis of him, and as well as what he's doing there and why, I think was really well done, really well fleshed out. The tie-in to the past and the present, everything worked really well there. Not as shocking of an ending as Sleepaway Camp or, Friday. But I still think it made for a solid film. And so with a total of 78 out of 100 points, I would absolutely recommend this movie. In fact, I would say that if you are a fan of the slasher subgenre of horror, in particular, that this is required viewing. I have never heard of this movie before. If you haven't either, but you love slashers, if you love horror, I would go out and watch this. It is an absolute must-watch, and I can't recommend it enough. So that should about do it. That's my review of 1981's The Burning. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you like these videos, please click like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, my Patreon link is below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.